They're celebrating victory, yet their candidate was not expected to win. Cem Özdemir, the Green frontrunner in the German state of Baden-Württemberg, was hopelessly behind in the polls. Then, this happened. These surveys, starting in October 2025, show how the Greens ended up overtaking the center-right CDU at the last moment. It's a comeback story, and who should be worried about the ramifications of that victory?
Specifically here where I am at the moment in Berlin, the German capital. But before we talk about those ramifications, let me explain why the official results are so unusual.
Above, you have the winning party, the Greens. Imagine, despite being the ruling party in the state, they were polling at only 17% a few months back in November. Below that, you have the CDU, also the party of Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz. They made actual gains compared to the last election, but basically lost a 14% advantage according to some polls. Why? More on that later. Of course, there's also the far-right AfD. They made significant inroads and doubled their results from the last elections. It's quite clear they are here to stay. And then you have the left-of-center Social Democrats, the SPD, and they are on life support here. You need 5% to make it into a German parliament, and the Social Democrats only made it by a hair. That's something that 10 years ago would have been unthinkable.
First, let's take a look what this means for the current German government, which is a coalition between the center-right Christian Democrats, the CDU, and the Social Democrats, the SPD. Especially the result of the SPD could be a real problem going forward.
On the day after the election, officials from the SPD gathered in Berlin. The mood was not great. Of course, for us it is a very bitter result. The discussion in the morning was difficult as well. It is absolutely clear that this saddens us greatly. The SPD has the same problem many Social Democrats in Europe have. Their traditional core constituents no longer vote for them. I sat down and had a conversation with Lukas Rudolph. He's a professor for political behavior. My question to him, why won't workers and middle-class employees vote for their traditional go-to party anymore, the Social Democrats?
Well, they have been captured, I guess, so to say, at least in part or in relevant parts by the fringes of the electoral system. So on the one hand side, the AfD, predominantly, I guess, but then also the left in parts. And I guess this does not only affect the SPD's voter base among the working class, but also more broadly. I mean, they now got 5.5% of the vote. 15 years ago, it was 23%. So this is really a disastrous result, speaking from the perspective of the SPD, of course.
Take a look at the numbers. Here are the results of the SPD in all federal elections since 2002. And here are the numbers for the state of Baden-Württemberg. It's basically only going in one direction, down. The decline of the SPD coincides with the rise of another party, the far-right AfD. Super satisfied. The AfD is the only conservative force that managed, despite this polarization between the CDU and the Greens, to achieve a truly significant result. We basically doubled our vote. I ran the numbers for the AfD on the past elections. Remember, the party hasn't been around a long time yet. The trend is clear, though, both in federal elections and state elections in Baden-Württemberg. The AfD is going up significantly. The lesson is, the party is here to stay all across Germany.
The success of the AfD has obviously become a huge factor in German politics, with its focus on migration, on nation, and on identity. And it's forced political parties to work together that probably would have avoided working together in the past, like the SPD and the CDU.
The SPD bosses, Lars Klingbeil and Bärbel Bas, know that their party needs to build a clearer case of why people should vote for them. But that's hard to do if you're stuck in a coalition with the center-right CDU.
Well, and why is that? I guess the SPD has really a hard time sharpening its profile. They have been in government, with one exception, for now in federal government for now over 26 years, and that means finding compromise on all sorts of things, and being made responsible for economic difficulties in Germany and so forth.
That begs the question. What happens when the SPD decides to sharpen its profile while still governing with the CDU?
Of course, they are in government, but then they also have to prove themselves in government. And what you usually have to do then is sharpen your profile against your coalition partner, and that will make it super difficult for the current federal level government to find compromise on major reforms that are needed right now in the country.
Those reforms have a lot to do with the economic and financial situation of the country. Germany's industrial sector is in decline, and guess which region is especially hard hit? Baden-Württemberg, with Mercedes, Porsche and Bosch, so the car manufacturers and everything that's connected to them. The polls show that the economy was the #1 topic for voters in the state elections. Despite the wars, despite the high profile of migration, as the saying goes, it's still the economy, stupid. A message that's also heard loud and clear in the German capital. And that brings us back to Cem Özdemir, the winning candidate in Baden-Württemberg of the Greens, a party that regularly ends up on the lower side of the polls for its economic competence. A majority of voters in Baden-Württemberg also find the Greens in Berlin, here you see their party bosses, overbearing and too focused on protecting the climate. So why do a lot of people in his state still trust Özdemir to solve their problems? Let's listen to what he has to say. We have raised many expectations among the people of Baden-Württemberg that the focus should be on the welfare of the state, not party interests. I have nothing to take back about that. This is how I want to lead the state. So there's a clear distancing from the party in Berlin, and with that, a strong focus on the man himself as one of the best-known politicians in the state, even the country. As the son of Turkish immigrants, he's repeatedly been the first to hold a certain political office with this particular background. That would also be true if the regional parliament elects him as state premier. My colleague Michaela Küfner talked to him about that after the election.
I haven't forgotten where I come from. I come from a working class family. I come from so-called guest workers. I'm the child of guest workers. So I see this also as an obligation to help every child to develop its full potential. So to prove that everybody can become whatever he or she wants to become.
Despite his roots, he's a kid from Baden-Württemberg, born and bred there. Many people in the region see him as one of their own. In polls, his popularity ranked far higher than those of his opponents. Yet, in the fall of 2025, when things were looking gloomy for the Green candidate, he could have been mistaken for an easy target. But he obviously wasn't. Why?
It was not all about personality, but personality played an important role. I guess that's a broader phenomenon in German politics, that faces get increasing relevance over parties, despite a party-centered electoral system, one might say. But still, yeah, that certainly played an important role.
The candidate from the CDU, Manuel Hagel, polled consistently below Özdemir in direct, not party, comparisons. Not separating himself from what's happening in Berlin probably didn't help either. Also, for the record, his campaign got tripped up by some of his remarks, including from 8 years ago, where he praised the physique of a student he had met. Nevertheless, when I talked to him before the election, he still seemed optimistic about his chances. It's about economic competence, bold education policy, and internal security. Here, people trust us the most as clear leaders in competence, and that is why jobs cannot be saved with green economic policy. The polls back this up to a certain degree. The CDU is the party with the highest perceived competence in economic matters, and still, Hagel lost.
If you add it all up, in the end, it's about trust. We've seen it in many elections all across the world. People end up voting for the politicians they believe will really represent them and fight for them. So in the end, personality beats party programs.
And that favored one man, Cem Özdemir.